Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. It's Monday, and it's going to be a scorcher today. I can tell already. A little hazy up high there, blue skies. They got to be a beautiful day. Hope you had a great weekend. It was exciting for me. We had an exciting weekend. Anyway, lots of stuff going on, but here we are back to Monday, and we are ready to dive into it and tackle this week and get things ready to go for Montalbano Monday. That's right. I mean, can you believe it? It's been a while, been a hot minute. Today on the program, Sarah Montalbano joins us for hour one here. She's in the green room right now, just scarfing down them virtual donuts. I mean, just eating them like crazy. But that's okay. Then in hour two, candidate for U.S. House Nick Begich III joins us. We're going to talk with him about endorsements and all kinds of stuff. It's got a big show this morning. We got a big show. So I suppose we should just shut ye old pie hole and get right into it, shall we? Shall we just get started and crack things open and get started? Let's do it. Joining us this morning is Sarah Montalbano, formerly with the Alaska Policy Forum education analyst, now author of a brand new Substack called, yes, you guessed it, Montalbano Mondays. And she joins us this morning to talk about everything that's going on in her world. Good morning there. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning. Doing pretty well. Yeah, it's a thrill to be back, and I had no idea Nick Begich was going to follow me. So that's awesome.
Build it up, Buttercup. That's what you got to do.
I'm just the preview.
Yeah, you're the opening act. But that's okay. You got lots of good stuff for us to talk about and to get things cracking. How are things going? So give us the rundown here. You've got a brand new Substack, which is for those of you who don't know, is kind of an curated online blog where lots of different writers. I actually have a Substack. I don't know how I ended up with one, but I did apparently signed up for one at one point because I just got an email the other day. Somebody follows your Substack. I'm like, I don't think I've ever written anything on my Substack, but there you go. Anyway, it wasn't you. But anyway, so you've got some new things. You've changed gigs a little bit. Tell us what's going on in your world before we dive down into the educational thing.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I have joined Center of the American Experiment. They are a think tank in Minnesota who is doing all sorts of energy education, environment issues as well, all sorts of things. I am an energy policy fellow there, so I am deep diving into the energy stuff, which has been really interesting so far. On the side, though, I figured, I should be curating all of the stuff I'm doing and pulling it all into one place. And that's where Montalbano Mondays came about. And I was thinking about this, and I launched, and for about a week or two, it was just Sarah Montalbano Substack. And I thought, that's just not right. Then it hit me. Montalbano Mondays, not only is it alliteration and it ties me to a rough posting schedule, but it also harkens back to all of the radio interviews I've done with you that, really ties me to my Alaskan roots. So I hope y'all will subscribe to it. It'll land in your inbox. You don't need to have a Substack account or anything like that. But For now, it'll just curate with what I've got, and hopefully soon I will begin writing some original content for it.
Great, great. Well, that's good. I mean, everybody has a voice to be heard, and people are always like, "Well, where do I find out more about what's going on here? What do I do for?" And I try and send them to the policy forum or wherever. It's nice to have it all, in one place. So, and kudos to Brian, by the way, who is the one that pointed me to it. He's like, "Hey, by the way, and so kudos to Brian in the chat room for figuring that out and alerting me to it, because I don't read Substack as much as I could get rabbit holed so hard on Substack. It would be
It's very
pretty.
easy.
It really is. There's a lot of good writers out there. There's another one out there for those of you who don't follow it, called Seward's Folly, and he's a writer out of Seward, and he writes about Alaskan issues, and it's a really interesting blog. So folks can go out there and check it out. So it will. It was good stuff. All right. Well, Sarah, so you're going to be delving into energy issues in the future here, but you've got quite the past record for education, and of course we're looking at all the different things, and I don't think that we have spoken about since the decision by the Superior Court to eliminate the homeschooling thing and the ramifications of that and everything else. And I have to be a little shamefaced here. I haven't looked to see if you wrote anything about that since that happened either. So what give us anything you've written, or let's talk about that.
I did. So this is one of the things that was happening just at the same time as I was fixing to depart Alaska Policy Forum. So I didn't have the chance to comment there, but I did write for Young Voices in National Review. Education choice takes a hit in Alaska. And so that it went over kind of the state of play in April. But what has happened since then, they're actually going to be hearing oral arguments this week on Thursday. So we will hopefully hear some news from the state Supreme Court coming up soon. But I don't think I have to tell all of you that, this is a severe disappointment. It is a hit for educational choice in Alaska. So I would love to elaborate more. I hope all of your viewers, you guys are pretty up on the issues. But that seems to be what's happening right now.
Yeah, no, let's dive into it. Because this was a huge. What I found most interesting was that right after the decision came out, there was this flurry of kind of panicky activity in the legislature for everybody else, the especially the left, Loki, Tobin, and others. Like all of a sudden they're like, whoa, we got, you think they bit off more than they could chew, kind of thing, and it was a whole new deal. And so anyway, let's dive into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the heart of this lawsuit that was brought by NEA-backed teachers and families was basically this contention about how allotment funds can be used, and that, the Alaska State Constitution says, well, you can't have, any private or funds can't flow for the direct benefit of any private or religious institution. I think that's the phrasing in there. So that's the contention. And what the Superior Court said was, absolutely, we can't have any of this. And not only that, but, all of these personalized plans, that this is unconstitutional too. And so that was so extreme that even the plaintiffs asked for a stay till the end of this month, which was granted. The state of Alaska said, we'd like a stay until we figure this out in the Supreme Court. We don't want changes made until then. And so that's kind of what's happened on the court level. In the legislature, there were two competing bills that I'm aware of. One was, I think, SB 266. And that one I think would have been worse. The House version is what eventually passed. And that did a couple of things that I appreciate. But what it relies on the Department of Education to implement those things. So what they directed was that the Department of Education needs to write some regulations and start to actually formalize these things. And the Department of Education isn't doing that until they have a ruling from the Supreme Court. So we'll see how this plays out. I'm really hopeful that something good comes out of the state Supreme Court ruling, that we look at this and we reverse some stuff and say, we can actually, fund education in that way. But we shall see. I'm no lawyer, but I think there's a strong case.
Well, and I think the biggest thing was that this hit such a wide swath of people in the state of Alaska. I mean, we're talking about 25,000 students out of a state with only 140,000, 145,000 students. That's a big chunk.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a lot until you think, wow, that's about 1 in 6 of Alaska students are taking advantage of this opportunity.
Right. Well, and it's also the knock-on effects of, because it wasn't just, allotments. It wasn't just, secular school. It was everything, private institutions. So now you've got, AvTech and course, but not correspondence, tutoring services and all these other things that, and even somebody, I think even the state made the argument that, McGraw-Hill is a private organization. Can we not spend money with a private organization to provide textbooks? And people roll their eyes and go, oh, that's ridiculous. But that's what he said. He said we can't spend public funds in private institutions, and that's a huge deal.
Exactly. And that is something the state brought up that hadn't even occurred to me. I thought, wow, yeah, if there is this really broad reading, then all of these vendors that the brick and mortar schools are contracting with could be in violation of this. And so I think since then the judges clarified, no, I didn't mean that. But this is something that needs to be hammered out at the highest court in the state for us to actually have some clarity here, because we can't go into the next school year not knowing what rules apply.
So Deed is going to hammer out some new rules for now. And I'll be honest with you, I found this whole thing a little baffling, because we sent our kids through the IDEA program, and IDEA had very strict rules on what you could be reimbursed for and what you couldn't. I remember one year I ordered some curriculum for a math or something, and I ordered it from a Becca or somebody. I ordered it from somebody, and they're like, "Oh, we can't reimburse that because it was a religious institution, religious supplier or whatever." And I'm like, "Oof, well, I just ate that $300 curriculum." But that's okay. I mean, it is what it is. But I mean, some of these organizations were very, strident about it, and yet they all seem to get punished the same in the long run, instead of picking and choosing.
Yeah. I mean, it's really unfortunate, but how it's been interpreted so far through this is just that, it can be from, some of these, non-secular institutions, as long as it's not like a secular course of or a non-secular course of study. You can study math from your Christian school, but you can't, study Christianity at your Christian school. So I find it a really weird line that we've been walking so far. I really do think that we should be spreading this freedom around as much as possible, because ultimately I think parents know the best ways to educate their kids, and they're able to select the curriculum and all of these things that would make their child's experience better through this correspondence program. But there's been so much concern of, well, how are these funds being used? And it's going to be hard, I think, at the state Supreme Court level to really make this case. But I'm hoping that things go well. I think we'll see. Look, this is part of a long tradition. We've been doing this for a long time, and this is part of our reality.
Sarah Montalbano is our guest. We're going to continue with her here in just a moment. You can find her at sarahmontalbano.substack.com and go out there and read the Montalbano Mondays Substack. We're going to continue discussions there. More on education, and then on the third segment, we'll dive into some of the energy issues since it's a big deal here in the state, especially in the South Central area here. We'll talk about that a little bit. We'll be back with more. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We return with Sarah Montalbano right after this.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Okay. We're in the break. Sarah Montalbano, our guest. Yeah, you could go out there and check her out. She's got the thing. Brian actually dropped a link to her story on educational choice when that all came out, and doing your thing. So all new things. Is it exciting? Is it an exciting time? Or you give us a little bit of personal background here on all this. How's it going?
It's been exciting. I'm missing touching the Alaska issues, though, and that's kind of what's pushed me towards some of this, deeper into my extracurriculars, too. But it's been really nice to focus on energy and just have the one issue area. And, I have a really fantastic organization now. American Experiment's doing a lot of cool things across all policy areas and not just energy. So it's been good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the first time I had never heard of them before. So this is we'll have to dive into it and see what else that they have to offer over there.
Yeah.
You'll have to tell your coworkers there that they may get a phone call from some guy in Alaska who wants to quiz them on stuff. And, we'll do more interviews or stuff like that.
Yeah. That'd be great.
Excuse me.
Of course.
Swallowing my own tongue this morning. This whole thing with the judge and the school choice, and we can delve into this here just a little bit deeper. It really shocks me because I think they weren't prepared for the breadth of the ruling. And you could see that in a little bit of the panickiness that was coming in the, from people like Loki Tobin who had the vapors, like, what are we going to do with all these kids? Because they realized that if you had to put those 20,000 kids back into the regular school system, there was just, the money wasn't, because the correspondence kids, the homeschooling kids, they're only receiving about a fourth of what the costs of a regular student. And if you put 20,000 more students back into the system, you're going to crank the cost up by millions and millions of dollars.
Absolutely. And Alaska Policy Forum's senior education fellow, Bob Griffin, did some actual running of the numbers of that in our March 2023 testimony in front of the House Ways and Means and Education Committees. And I can't recall the numbers, but it was a significant addition if all of these students were to go back into brick and mortar schools. So I think there was definitely something they didn't calculate for there. I think also, just as a general principle in lawsuits, people reach for more than they expect to get. And I think they just got everything they were reaching for this time. And it really just wasn't what they were planning to do.
Yeah, no, it was a couple $100 million, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was the number that Tobin threw out there, was that it was going to cost him something like a couple. Which, I mean, that's the thing. You're already spending $2 billion on education in the state. You're going to throw another $200 million on top of it. That was a significant chunk of change, and definitely a little scary. I interviewed Aaron Smith from Reason Magazine last week. I don't know if you got a chance to hear that or if you heard about that or not, but we were talking about the pernicious problems with COVID funds. He did an article that kind of analyzed the problems that are going on across the country as a result of all this free COVID money that was going in. And I know you and I have talked about that as well. And we're still seeing some of the ramifications and the effects of that. Are we not?
Absolutely. I mean, the COVID funds thing is so tricky because right now we're about to start running out of all of it. I think they have to have spent it by the end of this year, pretty much. And now they're seeing this big fiscal cliff, and they're seeing this come down, and they're not quite sure where to make up that funding.
Yeah, they especially especially districts that went ahead and used it completely contrary to the published advice, which was don't spend it on reoccurring things. And yet some districts, and Aaron talked about this, many districts across the lower 48 did exactly the same thing.
Absolutely.
It's it's madness. Predictable results, right? That's exactly, this was all completely preventable and predictable. That's what it was about. All right, Sarah Montalbano is our guest. Let's continue ahead here. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Enemy. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Yes, I am. Welcome back to the program, The Michael Duke Show. Monday edition of the program, what we lovingly call Montalbano Mondays. And joining us on the program is the lovely, the talented, and the so affluent Sarah Montalbano, who is now has her own Substack. If you haven't gone out there and checked it out, you can find her at sarahmontalbano.substack.com. I've got links up in the chat room right now for folks who may have questions about that. There, you can go see it there. We've been talking about education. And so, Sarah, to finish up this whole thought on the homeschooling thing and everything else, how do you see this changing? How do you see this changing the face of education in Alaska as they struggle to try and find this, put this together? And what do you see the ramifications being, speaking as yourself, as your own Substack person? I don't want you to put words in any organization's mouth, but speaking as yourself, what do you see the political ramifications of this being? Because, I mean, I quite honestly, you had the families of 20,000 students who were like just blithely, trooping along, we're doing it. And all of a sudden this got yoinked out from underneath them. Do you think it motivates them politically in this upcoming election season? So give us your thoughts on the final outcome and then the political ramifications.
I mean, it's an excellent series of questions. I think what's very likely to happen in either case, no matter if the state Supreme Court says no or a yes on Thursday, we've seen parents reawaken to this, and we haven't had a kick like this in Alaska, I think, since the pandemic. I think a lot of homeschoolers are saying, wow, we didn't even know we were on the chopping block. A lot of these correspondence students, like you said, they were just trooping along. And then, that it's become such a hot button political issue, I think just seems nonsensical to them. They think, well, why can't I educate my children the way I see fit? So I think that's a really powerful takeaway from this experience, no matter how it goes. It's just that we have people who now understand that there are people who don't want this for their kids, who are so opposed to it in principle that they bring it to the court and litigate over it, just so that their kids can't have these opportunities. So, main point there.
It feels like an attack, right? I mean, that's essentially what you're saying.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think it was absolutely meant to be that way. This lawsuit, I don't think was brought out of any actual concern for how children are being educated. I very much do believe that there was a motivator in the form that, well, this is a form of school choice and it's being used as a form of school choice. So we need to pull these kids back into the classroom. Because, if they don't, there are some very key motivators like the school funding formula. I've talked
Right.
about that a lot. These correspondence school students get 0.9, 90% of the base student allocation. Students in brick and mortar get so many times more than that, just through the multipliers in the formula. So I do think there's some very base motivations there that are icky. We don't want to be thinking about that, but
Right.
that organizationally is what's going on. Yeah,
They
it's
don't
amazing.
they don't like the competition,
Mhm.
That's the thing. That essentially is what they see it as. They see it as school choice, a certain form of it, which we have been on the cutting edge of for years here in Alaska. I mean, we first homeschooled our first
Yeah.
child 25 years ago, almost 30
Mm.
years ago. So this is not a new thing, and yet they continue to fight against it and try and peel back the layers, and they just don't like the competition. But
Mm.
it again, this could be kind of a doomy type situation, because if they have motivated those people to get out and become active, which in some cases I think they have, that could have ramifications down the path.
Absolutely, and I think, once this blows past, maybe some people say, "Oh, phew, that's over. I can get back to living my life." But I think there's a non-negligible subset of correspondence families who are going to say, "I'm not gonna forget this. I know
Yeah.
that this was not, what, you all wanted for my child, and, I know what's best here."
Some people are going to just continue no matter what. I think it was I think
Absolutely.
it was Rick in the chat room who said two families that he knows said it won't make any difference. They're going to continue to homeschool. There's going to be that.
Absolutely.
This just
Yeah.
made it easier and more convenient for some parents to be able to do that because it had some structure and it had some things laid out. But
Mhm.
I think this is part of a broader attack on the homeschooling movement, because,
Mhm.
of course, post pandemic, we saw the numbers across we're up to almost 3 or 4% now of all students are homeschooling, which is up from about 2%, which doesn't sound like much, but unless you realize that it was almost a doubling of the number of homeschooling students across the country. And now
Mhm.
we've got the latest, and I don't know if you saw it, Scientific American is now calling for the federal government to come in and regulate the parents of homeschooling, making sure that they, I don't know, give them a test, get them licensed. I mean, I don't know exactly all what the call, but I mean, this is an attack again, a continued attack on the homeschooling movement.
Oh, absolutely, and I was going to mention the Scientific American article as well as, back in 2020, there were parent or professors saying this from Harvard, homeschooling ought to be banned. And I think what if they can't obviously shift the Overton window that far to, make that acceptable, what they're going to look at are some various accountability requirements. They'll be looking at testing requirements, all sorts of oversight stuff. And what I want to be careful of is when we are looking at these regulations for our correspondence schools, I want to make sure that we're not over regulating this thing to death, because a lot of people want the correspondence program because there are some of these looser requirements and regulations around it. But there will always, I think, be the independent homeschooling. It's just not going to come with those funds that may also have those strings attached.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's the problem that we'll see here in Alaska is maybe some of these programs, especially ones that were kind of blatantly in the face of, you know, they were, I will just say Jody Taylor going out there and saying, sure, get your kids enrolled over here and you can get reimbursed 100. I think those programs are the ones that are eventually going to have some real problems. Probably places like IDEA who have a track record of being very stringent on where the money could be spent, they probably won't have as many problems. But the bottom line here is that of we need some kind of school choice in this state, some other kind of option, whether it's ESA accounts or backpack funding or something. There's obviously a hunger for that in the state.
Absolutely. I've loved the discussions that we've had through this session about charter schools and various public school choice options, but that is never going to be fully sufficient to meet the needs of every student. There's just a fact, we have 1 in 6 of Alaska's enrollment are in correspondence schools because they like that the best for their families. And I think when we dive into all of the money talk and we dive into the legal talk, it's all very important, but it doesn't change the fact that, parents have chosen this for their kids for a reason. And we don't need to know every one of those 22,000 reasons in order to say that this is an option they should have.
Absolutely. And, again, the parents are integral to the success of any student, whether they're in brick and mortar or they're in homeschooling, but obviously very important in the homeschooling movement. And we have this technology. I mean, why aren't we leveraging this technology more to where, a parent doesn't have to be a certified educator to be able to teach their kids the basic of reading and writing and arithmetic, and programs like Raven or Idea, where they have contact teachers that can help you, and those guys. I mean, it's not like we're reinventing the wheel. This has been going on for 30 years in this state. It shouldn't be we have to reinvent something.
Absolutely. And what I find really just I don't think at the end of the day when the Supreme Court looks at it that they're going to throw away the correspondence school program entirely. Like I do not think that is an option on the table. But what I do think is possible is they could say, we don't want these allotments anymore. So it's going to go back to the way it was where you didn't have any extra funding for for your student. And that I think would also be a pretty significant loss, because you look at your tax bill and you think, well, what am I paying state taxes for or property taxes? Where am I getting the education benefit back that I'm already paying for? And that's the same principle I think that underlies ESAs as well as, well, you're paying into this system and you're not getting to actually utilize that for your students. So let's give you a little bit of that back.
What do you think the chances are? I mean, again, we were again talking with Aaron Smith from Reason Magazine, and he was saying that the ESA he helped create the ESA program in Arizona, and he said that one has been kind of under fire, and they've been trying to chip away at it and everything else, but it's wildly popular. What do you think the chances are of us getting something like that here in the state of Alaska?
As far as an ESA, I really do. That little line in the Alaska State Constitution worries me about how that would be interpreted. And what I'm really hoping for on Thursday is that we get some clarity on what that means. And we can say, well, we should have this, we shouldn't, or not. I hope there's a chance for it because I think a full-fledged ESA program would be much better, in many cases to have as an option instead of having to do the correspondence school, do the homeschooling part-time or full-time. I am so excited to see what Arizona's been doing. They've really had some fantastic success so far. So I think, the battles we're fighting here are a microcosm of the whole school choice movement, and we just have this strange program that no one else has and no one else knows what to do with.
Right, right.
But in principle, I think we're talking about the same questions as ESAs.
Sarah Montalbano, our guest. Final thoughts here, Sarah, on the education question. We're going to jump into energy here in the next segment. So, final thoughts here on education in the state. What should we be watching for? The elections coming up. How what are the issues and what should we be kind of focused on there?
I guess I would say elections have consequences, and the ones that often do are the ones that we're not paying as much attention to. All of these judges have been, brought in, and there's confirmations on them. We should be thinking about paying attention to these things really locally. But I guess what I would say is, take care of your kids first. Make sure that your student has what they need. And Thursday, we're gonna see what happens. I'm excited. I'm worried, but
Yeah.
excited.
Cautiously optimistic or cautiously worried. I mean, that's one or the other.
Optimistically worried, I would say.
Optimistically worried. All right. Well, Sarah Montalbano is our guest. We're going to continue with her here in just a moment. We'll see what else she has to say with her new focus on energy. We'll get her thoughts on some of the issues and if she's been watching Alaska energy issues as well as the rest of the country. Overall, we'll see what she has to say about that. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more. And Sarah Montalbano right after this.
running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we are in the break. We are in the break, and now we are talking with Sarah Montalbano. Again, you can find her. Well, I posted it right there underneath her name. You can go see it. SarahMontalbano.substack.com. We need to get her just to get SarahMontalbano.com, and that way she can just point it right at her Substack. See? We can get you.
Forthcoming. We'll
Huh?
see.
Oh,
It'll
Lord.
be forthcoming.
It's
I'll let
forthcoming.
you know.
Yeah. It's amazing when you could take a website, just kind of point that name at anything. Yeah. So yeah, this whole thing with education has been such a battle, Sarah, as we've continued to see this across the nation. And now, as we were talking about, and we didn't really get into it on the radio, but that Scientific American thing, that was just one more take. And it's like they always. John Oliver did a piece on this. I don't know if you caught the John Oliver piece here a few months ago where he talked about homeschooling. And but every time they bring up this homeschooling, they breeze over the fact that homeschoolers statistically seem to do better academically than any other factor, any other subset of students across the country. They kind of breeze over that. And then they go, oh, but can also be used for abuse because in Minnesota or someplace, somebody abused a kid that was being homeschooled. And, and it's just like, those things do happen regardless of whether a kid's being homeschooled or not. I mean, yes, it is a tragedy. Don't get me wrong. And it's horrific, but you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. And that seems to be the answer is they find every bad instance of something like that they can find. And they don't highlight the good stuff, but all they do is highlight the bad stuff. And that is the line of attack that we see at every opportunity here.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me so much of things I've heard about the correspondence program. And what I've heard mostly there is that, well, our participation rates on the state exams are so low. It's only like 15% that are actually, participating in the exam. So how well do we know that they're doing? I don't feel like there's any reason that they should be statistically all that different from the general homeschooling population. I think there's just a group of people who don't want their student to have to spend time on these exams, and there's a group of people who like to homeschool, and those are often the same people. I don't think there's anything really nefarious going on. So it's the same stuff we hear about ESAs, though. It's the same stuff you hear about, public charter schools sometimes. It's all the question of, well, how do we actually hold them to the same level of accountability? But the fact is that if you're not getting the education you like at a correspondence school, you just switch. If you don't like it at a charter school, you just switch. And, some charter schools can be shut down. When's the last time you saw a public school get shut down for performance?
Well, and you look at the performance of regular brick and mortar schools, and we're, 48th, 49th. Oh, we jumped up to 46th. Great. I mean, we're high standards kind of thing. And so really, I mean, to quote that famous politician, what difference does it make? I mean, really, at that point, if you're homeschooling and you're doing better than the 46th out of 50th percentile, you're doing pretty good one way or the other.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I agree completely. And it's just such a you've said this before, your class size is one, and that parent can spend all of their time thinking about, how is my student doing? What can I do for them? So I really do think they're the best equipped in many ways to guide this if that's what they so choose. And they don't need to be a professional educator to do it.
Oh, and Ron makes a valid point in the chat room. He said, look at all the NEA members who've abused their students. Maybe we should get rid of the NEA. I mean, it's the same kind of thing. I mean, I've got family members who suffered abuse in the system from regular school teachers. And so it's not just restricted to the homeschooling movement, but somehow because they've got the stamp of approval of the establishment or the education industry, that's the better. Oh, it does happen, but not very, except for that we could go across the country and see it time and time again, both male and female teachers, inappropriate behavior and things like that. Again, it's just holding up the negative. It's reinforcing the negative and avoiding the positive, any kind of positive aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so sad that we're so willing to look past all of these things that are happening in public schools, students that are being bullied and until they commit suicide. That's amazing to me that this kid wasn't able to get out into a school choice program or brought back to home. There's so many reasons that we ought to be having these options available, at least for these last stitch things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I 100% agree on that. All right, let's continue ahead here. Sarah Montalbano is our guest. We're going to talk and dive into energy, and we'll get her to describe all that to us and what she's covering, and then maybe we can touch on some Alaska energy issues as well. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay. Sarah Montalbano. Whoa, that's loud. Sarah Montalbano, our guest. We're continuing here our discussions. Now, Sarah was working in the past for the Alaska Policy Forum as their educational analyst, but she has moved on to bigger and better things. Again, she got published here recently in some of the major national outlets and has moved over. So again, tell us a little bit here about your new gig where you're dealing more with energy issues, and give us kind of a framework for that as well at your new location.
Absolutely. I'm now an energy policy fellow at Center of the American Experiment. They are based in Minnesota, and they cover a variety of issues, but I get to focus on the energy side of things. And so I'm on a team by myself. That means I get to do a lot to drive the agenda here, which is really, really an exciting opportunity. So what I have been talking about a lot in my work as a senior fellow at the Independent Women's Forum just last week is electric vehicles. I have a lot of problems with electric vehicles, but I can elaborate on those in a moment. Some of the other stuff we're talking about is this kind of energy security and national security stuff. We're really thinking about, well, how are we going to mine the materials that we would need if we were going to do this green transition? Do we have that much? Are there, where are they in the world? Are they available? And questions like that, as well as, just looking at it's dangerous if we're offshoring all of these capabilities. So that's kind of a broad strokes of my work so far in the energy space.
It's interesting, the whole discussion surrounding electric vehicles, and the, how it's being portrayed as this panacea of perfection. This is the ultimate. This is the dream. And they show the car on the showroom floor, and they show it driving down the road, but they never show what it takes to get it to that point. They don't show you the process that it takes to build, to manufacture, to get the raw materials together. And then they don't show you what happens 10 years down the road, maybe in some of these, sometimes less time, once the vehicle is essentially worn out. And then you have, disposal problems. I mean, everybody's worried about, nuclear waste, but is anybody worried about heavy metal, heavy element, rare earth element waste or things like that, where you see the pictures of a whole wrecking yard full of nothing but, electric type vehicles that have got 1,000-pound battery packs in them. And they're like, we don't really know we have no way to recycle them and everything else. I mean, this is a big deal. So give us your pitch here on what you're covering under electric vehicles for the American experiment.
Yeah, it drives me nuts. You've covered a lot of them, but I'll reiterate that we have a huge quantity of minerals in each of these batteries, and the emissions reductions when we're looking at this, where are these mined? Well, they're often mined overseas. Well, what energy is being used to mine those? That's often through burning coal. It's an extremely energy intensive process. So not only are you bringing up these things that will pose recycling problems later, but you're also, not saving it a ton of emissions to do it. And then the other thing that I'm just really driven crazy about is the federal policy around it, because we have all sorts of standards, things called cafe standards, that have added ludicrous multipliers to EV energy efficiency. And what that means is that places like Tesla, where they're only manufacturing EVs, they get a ton of credits that they can then sell to other automakers, and to subsidize, some of these, internal combustion engine cars. They can meet their fleet-wide fuel efficiency standards by just producing some EVs that don't even need to be in demand by consumers, because they have such a steep multiplier on them. I don't know if I've explained that well, but the long and short of it is that they get to produce these EVs, they get all these credits, and then they don't have to actually look at emissions for most of the rest of their fleet.
Right.
They can just continue to manufacture whatever they feel like. So that's a large part of it. And then third, just we consumers aren't buying them. They're not that interested. And then when we have mandates like the EPA's recent, you know, uh, tailpipe emissions rule that came out, that's going to force a transition to EVs, whether we like it or not, unless that's struck down by the courts later. So I think we're just seeing so much posturing around them when, the long and short of it is that consumers would vastly prefer a hybrid if they have to do anything like that at all. But most of them just want internal combustion engines.
Right, right. Well, that's the thing. The demand has seriously dipped, and the only reason that demand was there in the beginning was because of government subsidies and
Yes.
many other things. I mean, there was a prestige factor for Tesla to begin with. I mean, that was kind of
Mhm.
the new fancy, shiny thing. But even now, that is kind of going by the wayside. You've got the problem, of course, with infrastructure,
Mhm.
charging infrastructure. You've got the
That will
problem.
cost in the trillions. There
Yeah.
was a recent report about that.
Well, a Buddha guy was on we got quizzed on I can't remember, CNN or something. They'd received billions of dollars to put 2,000 charging stations across the country. This was back in 2020, and
Mhm.
they've installed less than 100
Yeah,
out of
it was
2,000.
8.
8.
8.
That's what it was.
They have installed 8.
I knew it was some ridiculous number of a super low. They were supposed to put 2,000 charging stations, and they've put 8 after receiving billions of dollars in 4 years. And that doesn't even touch on the problem of the energy crisis in places like California, where they've got rolling blackouts because of power usage. And now they want to put a gazillion, I don't know how many million of cars there are in California. They want to put those onto the power grid as well. And
Yeah.
it's kind of a startling when you look at it and you look at the numbers from the what it takes to actually build a green electric car to the usage and then to the end of the life cycle of it. We are treading a very dangerous path here.
Yeah. If people like EVs, they should be free to adopt them. But what I don't like is that we're forcing this on a timeline that does not make sense, with materials we're not sure are there for a grid that can't handle it. And that it's going to be at enormous cost to the US taxpayer. And that is my primary concern with it. And then if we look at all of this in the broader context of the green movement, we're seeing that, we're routinely retiring baseload, reliable coal, natural gas fired plants, and we're adding in all this wind and solar capacity. But what do you do when the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining? You say you're going to store them in batteries. Well, we have 2 minutes of battery storage capacity. That's not at all going to be sufficient. So my general positioning around this is that the technology just isn't ready for what we're trying to do with it at the governmental scale.
Widespread
Um,
adoption, right? Widespread
yeah,
adoption. just not there.
Exactly. And if we actually let this take the course that it should, we would have a gradual adoption and the infrastructure would come along with it as the private market saw fit to do so.
Yeah, no, I mean, this again is a bigger problem, I keep hitting on it, but again, the end of the life cycle, we don't know what's going to happen with thousands and thousands of tons of these batteries. I mean, nobody's set up to recycle them yet. I mean, you can recycle the materials, but how energy intensive is that?
Yeah.
How energy intensive is the recycling of these processes going to be? And is it becoming a disposable kind of situation where, again, if your vehicle only lasts 10 years, oof, man, I've got 4 vehicles parked in my driveway that are all almost 20 years old and I'm using them all. I mean, right? If you could only use them for 10 years, that just again drives the cost up. And again, it precludes some of the newer, cleaner energies like hydrogen powered cars. Hydrogen now is the thing. I saw Volkswagen's got their new hydrogen powered car out there that they're doing as a test bed. I mean, that seems like a more viable, cleaner option in the long run, but everything has been abandoned, it seemed like, to the exclusion of these EVs.
Yeah, well, the reason for that is that we have subsidies demanding a certain use of technology. And what I also don't like about it is that we're cementing this level of wind and solar technology because that's what they can deploy quickly to take advantage of, Inflation Reduction Act subsidies. So we're not seeing the innovation we need to. And what I would really love to see is more nuclear. Like I wrote before in, I think, C3 Solutions about these small modular reactors, excuse
Right.
me, that I really think could be promising if we actually build them and have the siting available for them. So yeah, I really do see myself as an energy optimist. There's a lot of good things we could be doing, but our government policy needs to step out of the way.
Yeah, no, micronuclear, nuclear batteries, Nick salt reactors. I mean, these are things that we should be looking at, but
Yeah.
nobody's talking about it. Final thoughts here, Sarah. Less than 60 seconds. Final thoughts for today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the support all of your listeners have given me through the years. I think Montalbano Mondays could be really successful with all of your help. So please subscribe sarahmontalbano.substack.com. And you can also find me at American Experiment and on Twitter.
Look forward to seeing what else you write about and what else. We didn't even get into Alaska energy issues, which I think is an interesting discussion that we should
There's
get
so
into.
much to talk about.
So much to discuss on that. Sarah Montalbano, our guest. We will continue the Michael Duke Show. Hour 2 is Nick Begich, candidate for U.S. House. He's up next. Thank you, Sarah. If you got to go, be kind, love one another, live well. We'll see you for hour 2. I'll pick Sarah's brain for just a second on this Alaska energy issue. I'm watching this whole thing with this South Central Gas thing, and it's this whole idea of fetishizing Alaska gas. Like it can only be Alaska. We can only burn Alaska. We can't. We shouldn't be dependent on outside source. We shouldn't. Yet, I mean, we do that for everything from food to goods to manufacturing and everything else, because in the long run, it's cheaper and it's better for the state in the long, in the long run, because we're not expending an extra gazillion dollars trying to make sure that we had it manufactured here or anything else. Now, I mean, there are issues, sure, food security, et cetera, and we could have those issues. But this idea that somehow the only way we can do it is to burn Alaska gas, and to do that, we've got to subsidize it with tax dollars or with state monies, or it's going to be paid for one way or the other. It's going to be paid for either at the nozzle at the bill that the people are buying, or the state is going to fund it, and it's going to be taken in some form of taxation, right? In the end.
I think so. And I do have to hop in now. But what I will say about it is just, there's an argument, but it's just not true for everything else we've seen.
Yeah.
I would love to see if we can figure it out, but I do agree that it's coming out somewhere.
It's
Absolutely.
an emotional issue that we're doing it with emotion instead of reason. Sarah Montalbano, thank you, my dear. Appreciate it.
Thank
We'll
you
see
so
you later.
much. See ya.
Appreciate you coming on board. All right, Sarah Montalbano, our guest there on the program. That leaves Ms. Begich, who is in the green room hanging out, ready to go. Let's bring him on board here and see if we can get a test. We'll get the test going on. Hello, sir. How are you?
Good morning. I'm
Good.
doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. You all ready for the hour of pain, or whatever it is that we're bringing up here?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. How you been, Nick? How are things going? I see. I gotta say, I saw a lot of good news come out this weekend for you after a bit of a setback last week, which we talked about on the program. But we'll get into that. But you have a good time?
Oh yeah, no, we had a great week. A lot of in-state support, which is fantastic. Really excited about that momentum, and people are ready for a change. They're ready to send a message to DC that we will be selecting our representative up here, and people are pumped and enthusiastic. And there's been a huge surge of that enthusiasm over the last few days.
Yeah, no, and I think it's good. I think it reminds me. It reminds me of the old bumper sticker that you used to see when I was growing up as a kid, that you'd see on the old pickup trucks as they flew by, that said, "We don't give a damn how they do it outside." Right? I mean, that was. Right. You remember those? Remember those bumper stickers? We don't give a damn how they do it outside. And I think that is kind of the Alaskan attitude overall. And obviously disappointed in the whole Trump thing and everything else. But in the long run, I think Alaskans are like, nope, don't care. I think in a lot of ways. And so anyway, we'll discuss that. What else you been doing? What else we got about 3 minutes here. What have you been doing here lately? Give us your itinerary. Where you been?
Oh my gosh. Sometimes I don't even know what day of the week it is, because there's no breaks, right? We're 7 days a week all over the state. Yesterday, we had a great time going out to a race. It was a private race out in Wasilla, and they had some really cool four-wheeler competitions going on out there. Fantastic for kids and family to go out. They have water slides, all sorts of things. And who knew that we had something like that going on in Alaska? But no, we continue to go to events. We're trying to meet people where they're at. There's so many folks out there. They don't go to a political event. It's not in their wheelhouse. It's not something that they're going to take the family to. So we're trying to find them where they're at and meet those folks. And so we continue to do events throughout every week as we head into the primary here in just a few weeks, trying to make sure people understand there's a vote on August 20th. Make sure that you're informed, had an opportunity to talk to your candidates. And if you haven't seen your candidates out there, that might be an indication about who's going to be working for you in DC.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to say one thing about Nick Begich, is that he is probably one of the hardest working people I know, because you've been traveling this state for months upon months. I mean, rarely taking time off to spend a little time with the fam, going, everywhere. And I can't say that about any of your opponents. I haven't seen any of them. Not even, I mean, I don't attend all of your events, obviously, but I see the posts of where you're going to be, right? And it's exhausting. And I don't see that coming from anybody else in this race, going out there and meeting and greeting the people, like you said, where they're at.
That's right. Well, I like to say this is an audition, right? It's an extended job interview, and your candidates should be working just as hard, at least as hard, on the campaign as they would be when they're working in DC. And so, you can get a sense of who's really going to put in the effort. There's an old saying in DC: there are show horses and there's workhorses, and Alaska needs a workhorse in Congress.
Absolutely. Quickly, less than 60 seconds. Charlie says, ask Nick what kind of reception he got at the Republican event Friday and the SCC meeting on Saturday. How'd it go?
Oh, it was enormous support. Enormous support. I mean, it actually was overwhelming amounts of support. that Friday night meeting. I mean, I wasn't speaking. It was for a House Majority fundraiser, but they were introducing candidates, and there was just tremendous support in the room. It was overwhelming. And I think for people who were there, they could tell you that. They could tell you that.
All right. Well, we'll continue here. Nick Begich is our guest. We'll pull him back into the room here. Get ready to go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show. Streaming live across the world.
Yep, live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Welcome back to the program. It is the Monday edition of the big show. Looks like it's going to be another scorching nice day out here in the South Central area. I know it's been a good summer so far. I can't wait to see what the rest of it brings. But we are ready to go. Hour two. We just finished up with Sarah Montalbano, which if you haven't checked her out, Montalbano Mondays are kind of back as a thing. She's working for the Center for the American Experiment right now as an energy analyst, but she came in to give us a little bit of analysis of education because that's also her bag. And we're going to have her back here on the program quite regularly to give us an update and keep things rolling on that. But joining us now on the show is a candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives, Nicholas Begich III. He joins us here this morning. I kind of made that sound like Thurston Howell.
As long as I'm not Gilligan.
As long as you're not little buddy. All right. Nick Begich joins us this morning to talk about, a little bit of everything. And there's been a lot of stuff going on in the world of the race for the U.S. House seat. And he joins us this morning. Good morning, my friend.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me back.
Well, as always, it's a pleasure. Of course, the big news, Nick, what had everybody talking and quite honestly had a lot of people kind of upset. I saw a lot of posts on Facebook. It created kind of this dichotomy in people's minds of I'm a fan of Trump, but I'm also a fan of Nick. And at the same time, Trump endorsed Nancy. And it was just kind of this short circuiting process going on. And what I'm talking about, of course, is Donald Trump's endorsement of Nancy Dahlstrom for the race, which seemed really out of character, quite honestly, when it was all said and done, because he's all about being the maverick. He's all about being the underdog. He's all about out there doing the work, all the things that you've been doing. And, and it's kind of surprising. I mean, you spent time with him, you've talked with him, you were down in Mar-a-Lago, all these kind of stuff. And yet we saw this pop up. Give us your initial thoughts on this as it came out. And, was this expected, unexpected? Walk me through the political strategery of this.
Just to correct something there, I have been to Mar-a-Lago one time. I've never spoken with Donald Trump. I've never met with Donald Trump. He's never called me. We've never had an opportunity to have a conversation, and I've reached out to his team for that opportunity many times, and we've just never had that chance. And I know he's very busy. He's making 1,000 decisions a week, and there's a lot that is on his plate right now. And so, look, he's made his decision. It is what it is. I continue to support Donald Trump. I've supported him for a long time, all the way back to 2016. I was at his inauguration in 2017. I've donated to Donald Trump. I've even spoken at Donald Trump events. And so it was disappointing, but we move on. As we were talking about in the last segment, Alaskans decide. And we don't care how they do it in the lower 48. In fact, when you think about who Alaskans are, most Alaskans are people that decided they didn't want to be told what to do by people in the lower 48 and left and came to the last stop on the road. And so we do it our way. We continue to confound people outside of Alaska. They don't understand our politics. They don't understand who we are, what we are. We're a mystery, an enigma. They have entire shows and even a channel dedicated to what is this place? Who are these people?
Right.
And so we do it our way. And I think you could see that over the last week and the weekend with the comments online and the feedback certainly that I was getting. And then, what we saw at the Republican events this weekend in Wasilla, huge support. And we're excited. We're moving forward, and we're going to let the people decide who it is they'd like to see.
Well, and I said it during the break. We were talking, Nick and I were talking during the break, and it reminds me of when I was growing up. You used to see those bumper stickers on the trucks going by, the cars going by that said, "We don't give a damn how they do it outside." And that's probably one of the most Alaskan expressions that you'll ever see. Followed by the one that said the answer to every problem is a number 2 shovel and 50 pounds of lie. That was the other bumper sticker that I remember from growing up as a kid. But I mean, really, we don't give a damn how they do it outside. I mean, and that's kind of how we are around here. Was I shocked by this? A little bit, but not really. And then secondly, Joel on YouTube makes a comment that really kind of, I think, summates the problem. Donald Trump does not have a great record with endorsements. As far as, you could think he's a great president, great guy, but his endorsements have been kind of 50-50, right? So I'm not too worried about this, especially based on the reactions of people that I talked to and people that I saw. And of course, Nick, this last week, you just alluded to the fact that this last week, the Valley Republican women passed a resolution supporting you, even though they support Trump for president. The Kenai Republicans as well, and what was the other one? The Matsu. Fairbanks. Fairbanks Republican. So we've got 3 different major Republican groups in the state of Alaska who have all basically said, we love you, Don, but you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Nick's our guy. And you've been receiving these endorsements kind of continually over the last year.
That's true. And they've been organic. That's what really, has been a big part of the surprise on our side with the response of support is that, we're not requesting this. This is coming in on its own. We're not approaching these groups saying, hey, we'd love to have your support, and we are honored to have their support. But this is their membership stepping forward, saying, "Hey, we're going to send a message," and it's again overwhelming. It's been incredible to see, but it's actually energized the base in what otherwise was kind of viewed as a little bit of a sleepy race. There's a huge amount of money that's been coming into the state for the Democrat, Mary Peltola. She has raised just millions upon millions with additional monies pledged of up to $10 million that we've seen so far coming in for her campaign. So on her side of the aisle, you're seeing maybe $20 million spent on a House race in Alaska just for the Democrat. And so we've needed attention on this race, both in-state and nationally. And so in some respects, this is really good news to have some eyes on Alaska. We have the opportunity to take the seat back. This is the most conservative district in the country that is represented by a Democrat, and it's not even close.
Right.
And so when you look at the political ideology and sort of that center of gravity of ideology in Alaska, we're red. We're still a conservative state. And so this is a pickup opportunity. It's an opportunity to get better representation, in my view, for the people of Alaska, to have someone who is a strong conservative, but it's going to take resources to do that. And in this last week has kind of shown a light on Alaska to say, hey, this is a pickup opportunity, folks. Pay attention. We're going into the primary, and we're going to see how things shake out after that.
Yeah, because again, just to highlight the fact that, Nick, you've already made the commitment, and I have not seen Nancy. I've sent out emails to the campaign and things to bring her on the program to talk about this specifically, because you've said, based on what happened in the last go-around, that you are not going to participate in this kind of three-way spoiler mess that you had last time between you and Peltola and Palin. You have said that if you don't beat Nancy in the primary, that you will drop out of the race. Now, the primary for most of the seats out there, in fact, of all but I think two of the seats in the House and the Senate for the state legislature, it's essentially a poll. It's a straw poll because
That's right.
they have four or less candidates. So I don't know what that's going to do to the involvement in the race, to the participation in the primary race. But this is an important race to get out there for, because you're trying to decide, do you stay or do you go? And Nancy hasn't committed to that. So you could be all alone on this one.
Well, that's it. It's disappointing that we haven't seen that commitment from other candidates, but it's understandable. They have their own calculus, I suppose. But here's the way I see it, and to me, it's just math. When you look at the sort of the left side of the aisle versus the collective folks on the right side of the aisle, for Republicans, let's say, for example, that Republicans perform well, and I expect that we will perform well, but as a group, get 55, maybe even 60% of the round one vote in November. Okay. You get that, and you would think, okay, well, we do that and the Republican's going to win, but not so fast, because a number of people will not rank their candidates, right? 1, 2.
Right.
And so what you're going to see is a ballot exhaustion effect. We saw it last time. It's going to be anywhere from 10 to 30% of people who get those ballots are not going to rank anyone else. No matter how many times you say, hey, we got to rank and we got to do these things, there's still a lot of confusion out there, and there's resentment about the system that we have, which is understandable. So it's people's right to say, I'm going to rank one candidate. Well, when that happens, you get a ballot exhaustion effect that makes it almost impossible, even with 55% plus of the vote going to Republicans in round one. You're going to still see a Democrat win if we've got multiple credible Republicans still in the race at that time. And that's what we saw happen in 2022. And we can't repeat that. That's why I've made this commitment from the beginning, because when you run the math don't lie, as we like to say on the show.
Right.
Math wins. The math will show you that you can't actually make that work. Now, the proponents of ranked choice voting will say, no, it's great, it's wonderful. We should follow the process if we just ranked. Well, if we just ranked, okay, but we don't. And so the challenge is, we got to deal with reality as it is, not as we wish it would be. And this system is gamed by the left in order to achieve their political outcome. And I tell folks, look, if the Democrats really loved ranked choice voting the way that many say that they do, well, then why aren't they running 3 or 4 or 5 candidates on their side of the aisle? They run one candidate on their side of the aisle because they know it allows them to consolidate resources. Their candidates don't have to run to the left side of their platform in order to figure out which of them is going to proceed through to the subsequent rounds of voting. So they run a candidate that runs a moderate sounding campaign to the public, is well financed. Everyone on their side of the aisle is on the same page, and their second place votes never go anywhere because their candidate's always going to be in the top 2. So we got to be smarter about this. And that's why I've said, look, this is the commitment I'm making. I hope others in the race make the same commitment, because we've got to be smarter on the right and play the game that has been laid out in front of us properly, so that we actually have an opportunity to take the seat back.
Yeah, no, I would agree with this, because it is, frankly, a numbers game in the long run. I held my nose and ranked the red last time, and ranked more than one candidate, even though I wasn't necessarily happy about it, but I did it. And we've got to make sure that we get people out for this primary so we have a better idea of what's going on. We're going to continue this discussion with Nick Begich here. We got to go. We're going to be back here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return with more here in just a moment. Nick Begich, our guest. Back with more.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Nick Begich, our guest here on the program. I mean, that's the fact. You know, when you've got a state that is, again, probably 55 to 60% Republican, votes 60, not by party affiliation, but votes 55 to 60% Republican all the time. This was the perfect plan to split that vote and to keep it going on and to enable somebody like Mary Peltola to get into office because it allowed for that splitting and those differences to come about. And it's a crying shame, but that's the truth.
It is the truth. I mean, anyone who's taken the time, and it takes a little bit of time to go through the numbers after they were released from the Division of Elections following the last election cycle. They released something called the CVR, which is the I may get this acronym wrong, but it's directionally correct. The Complete Voter Record. So it shows every single ballot's first, second, third, fourth choices for all of the choices across their specific ballot, and so for all the races across their specific ballot. And so there was an opportunity for data analysts to go back through that raw data and analyze how much ballot drop-off and exhaustion did we have, how much crossover voting did we have, how much bullet voting did we have, et cetera. And so a great deal of analysis has gone on with that data set following the election. And that's where a lot of this math comes from. You can see that ballot exhaustion effect, the crossover voting that occurred, and you can then, it makes more sense mathematically anyway, as to why we ended up with the result we ended up with. And you discover very quickly, well, it was a game that was played to perfection by the other side of the aisle, and there are lessons to be learned, and we have to learn those lessons. If we repeat the lessons of the past, this is on us. And I hope that we don't. I really do. I hope we don't.
Well, I hope so. And again, this is one of the reasons why I've been pushing so hard to try and find out if Nancy will make the same commitment that you did. And we're going to talk about that in the next segment, some of the polling that we're seeing right now. Because if she does make that commitment, then I'm not too worried. I'll be honest with you. I'm not too worried. Yeah. If she makes that commitment, but she's got to make that commitment, because if not, and we end up with, again, that three-way race at the top, it's probably Peltola, just based on simple arithmetic at that point.
Yeah. What happens is you go from maybe a 4-lane highway to defeating Peltola to a goat trail, right? Yeah. Theoretically, it's possible, but it's going to be a very challenging process at that point.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Absolutely with you on that. It's going to be a frustrating thing for sure. Just looking at the time here. I do want to talk about this weekend's event here when we come back and get, kind of a thing on that. Also want to talk about some of this polling that we've seen. There's been a couple different polls. I know that you did a straw poll at the state convention. I think that's where there was a straw poll that had been performed by Must Read or somebody out there at that point.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I know that one, that was an older one, but again, very strong for you as well. And you're not offering free beer. Yeah, no, you're not offering.
I'd love to talk about that. We should definitely talk about that.
We should talk about the free beer one, because that is that's kind of shocking in the long run, or in the short run for that one as well.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to continue here. We're about 45 seconds out. Nick Begich is our guest, and we will going to have we're gonna continue here. Please like and share the show, regardless of which platform you're watching us on today, Twitch or YouTube or Facebook. You can like it and you can share it from that platform. So feel free to go out there and do any of those things. And we just need to get more people involved in the conversation. That's what we need to do. I mean, who am I kidding? I just want more eyeballs on this program. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to hype it up. I want to get over 100 people in this chat all the time. We used to have that. We didn't used to have that. That's been a rare occurrence, but I'd like to get 100 people in the chat at any time. Let's see if we can push it out there. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Let's do this thing.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Okay. Continuing on, Nick Begich is our guest candidate for U.S. House. Last week, I sent out letters to a lot of people, emails, I guess I should say, to a lot of people, inviting them on the program during this election cycle to get them on there. I've reached out to Nancy and to Mary and to a couple of the other candidates that are running, all the ones that were in the state. I find it interesting that there is a handful of candidates who their addresses are all Arizona, Minnesota, California. They're living outside trying to run for U.S. House for Alaska, which I just find incredible, Nick. But I guess it's the law, right?
Yeah, I think there's 3 or 4, and technically, and as weird as this is, the U.S. Constitution apparently permits folks to run from outside of a state and a district, a congressional district, for that congressional district seat, as long as, should they win, they are living in that state or district, as it were, prior to being seated in Congress. And so
right.
Every year there seems to be this trend where someone from outside is registering to run for Congress in Alaska. This year, I think there were 3 or 4 folks from outside Alaska actually registering to run here.
Right. Well, and that's, again, you can thank ranked choice voting for that, because this is the primary process, right? So anybody can, last time there was 48, 49 candidates. So, 2 pages of candidates, you can make your choice. But yeah, in this case, there was, I think, 4 candidates from outside that decided to do it. It's shocking to me, but that's where we're at. Nick, you attended you had a lot of stuff going on over the weekend, and you had a warm reception as you went out. Tell us about this weekend. What happened?
Yeah, so we, the Republican Party meets every quarter. There's something called the SCC, which is the state's central committee. And this is, when you think about how a party is organized, the Republican Party is organized according to House districts in Alaska. So we've got 40 House districts in Alaska. Each district has the opportunity to organize separately as, Republicans. And those districts meet. They have their own district conventions. They elect leadership from those districts, and then that leadership team meets every quarter in different parts of the state to get together. They hold fundraisers for different events and candidates and causes within the Republican sphere, and then they have a business of the party that needs to be done every quarter. And so this weekend was the Republican House Majority fundraiser on Friday, and then on Saturday, the SCC meeting, this time in Wasilla. And just tremendous reception. The House Majority fundraiser was extraordinarily well attended. A lot of credit goes to Speaker Kathy Tilton and our finance chair, Ryan McKee, who organized this event. But it was incredible. Lots of candidates from all over the state. They went through and introduced the candidates, and the applause that I received, it was humbling. It was overwhelming response of support from those who had come from around the state, all the way, from Ketchikan and the interior and Fairbanks, down on the peninsula and here in South Central. So there was a lot of folks representing a lot of different areas of the state. and the support was very strong. Next day, I had an opportunity to address formally the SCC leadership team. Again, extremely strong support. People are motivated. They're ready to get in and do what it takes in order to win in November. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take grassroots. It's going to take the organized grassroots effort from all over the state in order to get the seat back and in order to compete with the tens of millions of dollars that are aligned to try to reelect Mary Peltola.
Interestingly enough, there was a poll that was put out last week by Must Read. Now, Must Read is a conservative news outlet. It's a mostly Republican conservative news outlet. But they asked the question after the endorsement. They asked the question a little bit a different way. They said, seeing as Trump endorsed Nancy Dahlstrom, who do you support for Alaska's congressional pick in August? And it was 83% Nick Begich. 83%. So that must mean you're doing something right. And these are the people who would be your voters, I would say, the conservatives. So that must give you some hope in the long run.
Well, it was, again, we continued to be overwhelmed with that kind of support, right? You'd expect that your friends and your supporters who were there with you before would continue to be with you. But to see something like this, it blew our minds. And it just as a reminder, look, Alaskans decide. We are independent thinkers. We understand people, and we're a community of folks who know each other. And so in Alaska, you in the lower 48, maybe 6 degrees of separation, but in Alaska, it's 1 or 2 degrees. So we know each other. We know each other well. If we don't know someone, we know someone who does. And we're just not going to allow folks from outside the state to tell us what to think.
Well, and unfortunately, and as they go through kind of the litany of who's supporting who, we can see here you're being supported and endorsed by the House Freedom Caucus, Senator Mike Lee, Brian Donalds, Scott Perry, as well as Vivek Ramaswamy. Meanwhile, Dahlstrom's being endorsed by the National Republican Congressional Committee. I think you make some people nervous, Nick. I think that's part of the problem here, is that the establishment, business as usual Republicans who, I mean, if we look at what the business as usual has been, it's not been great. They haven't done great.
No,
and so you're making them nervous.
I know you're. I don't think. I know you're right. I know you're right. I make a lot of people nervous down there. There's a concept again in DC. It's called. You've heard the term rank and file. Rank and file. What is a rank and file member? Well, there's somebody. First of all, you're never going to hear of. You've never heard of. These are folks that are backbenchers. They're people that they're not going to end up on TV very often. They're going to press a button and they're going to disappear into a committee room somewhere. And my view from the beginning has been, if you want somebody to go down to DC and just press a button, well, you need to vote for somebody else. That's not me. I'm not going down there to press buttons and to follow orders every single day. I'm going down there to actually make a difference for the state and for the country. If I'm in DC, I'm down there to fix problems. I'm down there to get spending under control. I'm down there to actually address situations like our most southern border, right? Those are real problems that need real solutions. And in order to solve those problems, you got to have strength. People down there have to be strong enough to actually say, no, I am not cooperating with this. I am not compromising on my core principles. I am going to find like-minded people in this Congress, and we are going to stick together to make sure that no matter what it takes, no matter how high the pressure, we're going to do what's right for the American people. And that does scare people in DC, because you got to understand, and you've talked about it many times on the program, Michael, this idea of the uniparty, right? Where you really effectively have the Democrats and the Republicans sort of working together to push these omnibus packages through the Congress that never seem to change anything. They never seem to slow down the spending. They never seem to do what people said they were going to do on the campaign trail. They're these massive bills. Nobody's read. They're too expensive. They grow the debt and the deficit, but they never address the problems. And the reason why we continue to see that over and over again is because throughout the country, we're electing people that are there to go along to get along. And I'm not that person. And people who know me know I'm not that person. And I think that's why you continue to see, even in the last week, that strong support persisting.
And I would agree with that. Again, I think that this means that you're, not to put too fine a point on it, you're nobody's boy. You know what I mean? You're not just going to do what you're told. And I think that really scares the hell out of some of the people who are down there in Congress. I mean, when you got somebody like Mike Lee, do they want another Mike Lee? Do they want another Thomas Massey? Do they want another Rand Paul? Do they want another free thinker who can analyze this stuff for himself and is not just going to go with the flow? But that's what the Mitch McConnells of the world and the Republican, that's what they want. They want the business as usual. And again, God love Nancy. I think she's a nice lady, but again, I think it's a go along to get along kind of thing. And that's what they're trying to push in this regard.
Well, it's interesting because in the last, I'd say 15 to 20 years, the Congress has consolidated its power base among leadership. And I remember talking to Don Young about this a couple of times, and he lamented the loss of power, more decentralized among the committee chairs. And he said, the way it used to work is that the committees would really determine a lot of the policy that actually ultimately was adopted in bills, and leadership had less power. And over time, those committees have lost that clout in the Congress, and it's been concentrated among a small group of House leadership. And that's not good for the nation. It's not good for either side of the aisle to do that. You've got to make sure that the 435 members of the House each have some level of voice, right? Because they're there to represent the people that sent them there. So it's really important that we do more to decentralize some of the authority and power within the Congress in order to get better outcomes. Because right now, that concentrated power allows just a very select few in official leadership positions to dictate policy, right. And that's not good.
Well, and that's how we get continuing resolutions. That's how we don't pass regular budgets. That's how we don't have regular order. Those things continue to keep the power where it is, which is amongst the leadership, and it's not making it easy in that regard. We're coming up on the break here in just a minute here, Nick. So let's move on to some of the hot topics that you've been watching on the national level. Obviously, the border issue. It's interesting to watch the president kind of flail around and embrace policies that he had heretofore abhorred, with opening and doing, closing the border, and then at the same time turning around and legalizing illegals who are married to there's a lot of stuff going on with immigration and the border. Give us your thoughts on it here. We got about 2 minutes.
Yeah, so you're 100% right. You've seen President Biden, I won't say doing a 180, but maybe 90-degree turn. He's changing his policies on the border, clearly for political gain, because the border is such a hot topic for him. But it's not just the border, it's immigration. And he's doing some things that are clearly legally dubious in terms of his executive authority. But he's making people citizens by fiat. He's allowing additional pathways to citizenship for people who are here illegally or in another sort of quasi-legal status. He's been accelerating the program that he's got to bring people in directly from their point of origin, where the U.S. government is literally giving people tickets to fly to the United States. And this isn't thousands of people. This is hundreds of thousands of people. And we know what the Democrat plan is because we saw it unveiled here just a few weeks ago when in the House, the Republicans put forward a bill to basically clarify that the U.S. Census numbers will count U.S. citizens and that only U.S. citizens will be determined when apportioning congressional districts in 2030. And every single Democrat in the House voted against that bill because they want these people who are non-resident non-residents of the United States, but who are in the country, to be counted in the census so that they can juice their numbers going into the 2030 census. That gives sanctuary states and cities like California, right, the ability to add additional House reps and take those reps from red states. Why is that important? Well, it gives them more representation in bodies like the U.S. House, but it also gives them electoral college votes. And so it establishes a regime of permanent power for the Democrats in the House and the presidency when they can accelerate these programs. And so that's what's been going on. It's fully out there. It's all out in the open. And President Biden and his team are looking for every single vector that they can use to add to those numbers.
Well, and he wants to tackle the immigration issue, number one, because it's risen on the list of items that people, the hot button issues that people care about. It's come from down near the bottom to up near, number 2 or number 3, depending on which poll you're looking at and what piece. And also, of course, to diffuse and distract from the economy, which is that's the number one issue right now. It's the money stupid, to quote James Carville, is that's what it's all about at this point. We're going to continue with Nick Begich here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We will return in just a moment. Final segment with Nick Begich, candidate for U.S. House, right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Makes me smile every time. It just kind of explained the series of tubes. Anyway, Nick Begich, our guest here on the program. The worst part about all this is that they talk about shutting down the border, and yet Ben, forgotten Ben's last name all of a sudden. Anyway, he's down on the border videotaping these people just still flowing across and in one video that I saw this last weekend, the vast majority of them appeared to be Chinese nationals, crossing the border. I mean, dozens of them. That really worries me.
It should worry you. It should worry all of us. I mean, folks, this is an invasion. Let's be clear about that. Now you can't have a country without a border. A country is in part defined by its borders. This is the point at which it becomes a different country. And so you have to make sure you know who is coming into your country and that they are properly vetted, right? Are these people criminals? What's their background? What's their history? Are they terrorists? We literally intercept terrorists that are crossing our southern border on a semi-regular basis. And they're just allowing these people to flood in. And, they can only count the people that they intercept. There's an estimated number of people that they don't intercept that continue to walk through this porous border. And if the Republicans in D.C. had any guts at all, and there are many that do, but if as a body had any guts at all, they would stop these continuing resolutions. They would stop funding these conflicts outside of the United States. And they would say, look, we're not funding anything until this is taken care of. And they don't. They've said they would, but they don't. And, yes, to your point earlier, they are worried if I get down in D.C. because I'm going to be one of those voices that says, hey, enough. Fix these problems now, not 2 years from now. You know what you have. You know the power you have. Use it. Because these problems are going to continue to give us negative dividends in the future if they're not solved today. And that is the challenge that we face as a nation. We don't have enough people with courage in D.C. That is the central issue, right? We don't have enough people with courage. They're going down there for other reasons, but it's not to represent you, the people.
Right. Harold's our resident troll, Nick, just so that you know.
I
Um,
can't read his comments while I'm talking. It's
yeah,
usually
he
distracting.
says when you don't have issues, blame the immigrants and minorities. Same old nonsense. Nobody's blaming the immigrants and the minorities. What we're blaming is the policies of the open border. That's what we're blaming. We're not blaming them for things that are going wrong in the country. Maybe some people are, but we're not here on the program. But I think if you are a nation, one of your primary functions is to protect your borders. That is one of the primary functions of a nation state, is to protect your borders from outside influence of people who would come in who have either bad intent or whose mere presence can wreck the balance of the systems that you have in place in your country. That's one of the main. I'm not blaming anybody. I guess I'm blaming the president. I'm blaming the policies that we have. That's the thing.
I was at an event this weekend, and there were many people from the Filipino community, and there's a large Filipino community in Alaska. And I had an opportunity to talk with folks, and I didn't bring up the issue of immigration. They did. And I heard from 3 different people on their own telling me how upset they were about this illegal immigration influx, because they had come into the country legally. They had done their paperwork. They did everything right. They took the test to become citizens. They're proud citizens of the United States, and they're frustrated that people are jumping the line, coming in here and getting free benefits, taxpayer benefits for being here. Right? These are people who left their country to come to the United States and did it right, and they're furious. And Harold, let me just tell you something. If you don't think immigration is an issue, you're completely out of touch with almost every American and every Alaskan that I've ever met with. That's a number one issue for many people. And I'll tell you, among conservatives, it's the number one issue, even in Alaska. So
Right.
that is an issue. It's an issue that people have, and it's an issue that I'm going to continue to talk about and address in this campaign and beyond. Because if we don't fix it, we're going to continue to have major problems in this country that will not get better, they'll get worse.
Well, I think it's because we are a nation of immigrants. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, we're a nation of immigrants that formed, but it's the difference between an additive and a consumptive model, right? I mean, when immigrants come, they follow the process, they do what they need to do, they come here, they're additive to the system. They become, entrepreneurs, or they go to work for IT, or they do whatever it is that they do. They're doing something additive. They're not showing up and then receiving free benefits and doing all these other kind of things, which are basically, again, draining the system, right? Consumptive efforts.
That's right.
They're not net producers, they're net consumers. So that's what it ends up being in the long run. All right, 20 seconds out. We're going to continue here, the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Nick Begich is our guest. We will kick things off right about now. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's do this thing. Okay. Continuing on, Nick Begich is our guest, candidate for U.S. House. We were just talking about, obviously, immigration. And my final comment before we went to break was, not only has immigration become one of the top issues in the country, I think the president was focusing on it because he was trying to detract from the number one issue, which seems to be the economy. And you and I have talked at length about this in the past, and about how, when they factor inflation, they've changed how they're factoring inflation now and everything else. And the true numbers are definitely different than what they are trying to tell us they are. Give us your thoughts on how the economy is faring and what could be changed to make this different.
Yeah, the economy is not what we're told that it is. And I think most of us know that. That's why, we turn on the news and we hear everything's fine, but we go through the drive-through at a Taco Bell or a McDonald's or any of these places, and we go, hey, we can't escape as a family without spending at least $35 to $50. And things have gotten obviously off kilter. And we're told, oh, these prices are going to come down. They're not coming down. They're going up. And we're being gaslit by the Biden administration to say, hey, everything's fine. Don't worry. Don't look at the guy behind the curtain over here. Life is good. And we're seeing our standard of living deteriorating. the Biden administration has been blaming the private sector for this problem. But the truth is, this isn't a private sector problem. This is a government problem. The government continues to spend money that they don't have. And in order to spend the money they don't have, they have to print it out of thin air. And they've been enabled by the Federal Reserve to do so. They've created money out of nothing, and they've shot it through the economy. And they've said, no, it's your fault. It's not your fault. It's their fault. It's the government's fault. It's Congress's fault. It's the president's fault. They're not instilling discipline in the system. And because of that, we're all suffering. And the economy is gonna be a problem until we get enough people again in Congress that say, hey, time out, no more. We're gonna balance this budget and leave this regime of what they call fiscal dominance, where the U.S. Government's budgetary expenditures actually control the entire U.S. economy. That's bad for everybody. We need to put the private sector back in its proper place and government back in its lane, so that we can have prosperity in the country again. Because if we don't, we're going to lose that most astonishing privilege that we have, which is being the world's reserve currency. If you lose that, suddenly life, you want to talk about inflation, life gets really expensive because we don't manufacture the things that we consume in this country. One thing I do want to talk about, and we haven't touched on yet, is something we saw over the weekend from the Peltola campaign, related to how her strategy for getting votes. And
you jumped the gun on me. You jumped the gun on me. Go ahead, because Nick Begich, your campaign does not rely on free beer, does it? I mean,
no, we do not rely on free beer. We're not the free thing army, we'll say. Yeah, there's an old strategy in politics that if you're losing and your record sucks, well, you better dig deep and get in the cooler and get out the free beer, because it's the only way you're going to get some votes. And we saw Mary Peltola do that in Fairbanks this weekend, put signs up around town saying free beer, come over to our headquarters for free beer. That's shameful. I mean, really, it may sound funny, but it's pretty shameful, because if for folks who are in Fairbanks or have visited, you'll know that downtown there's a problem there with homeless who struggle with drug and alcohol addiction. They're right next to Peltola's headquarters. She's offering free alcoholic beverages to the community, and these people are right there. That's a problem, And look, even the village that Mary Peltola says she's from, Queethluck, they actually restrict the sale and purchase of alcohol and the importation of alcohol, right? It's a dry village. And so for her campaign to be using free alcohol as a way to generate support it's shameful. It's disappointing. It's a practice that I would have thought would have been left to a bygone era. It's manipulative, and it's pretty transparently desperate of them to do that. Now, I recognize 90% of their money has come from outside Alaska. They had $3 million cash on hand as their last report. So I guess they got to find some way to spend it. But they should find some other ways.
Yeah, it probably wasn't Budweiser. It was some kind of craft beer. So they were really digging deep on it. But I mean, it raises some interesting questions like, did you have a liquor license? Did you have somebody there serving it? Was it just, were you just distributing it? I mean, there's some questions of legality there on top of that. But I mean, this is the same gal that held an event at a public school during school hour. I mean, there's a lot of fast and loose going on here during this campaign.
There's a lot. Yeah, and people say, why don't you sue them? Well, we're trying to keep our funding focused on getting our message out, showing what our policies are, exposing her record. There's just not enough time in a campaign. Look, if people out there think that something's been nefariously done, I would encourage them to go out and file a complaint about those things. But the truth of the matter is, it is shameful. It is disappointing. Every Alaskan who sees it, even if it's kind of funny in a way, maybe, but under the surface, you realize it's not good. It's not funny. It's not the kind of thing that we would expect from our single sitting member of Congress.
Right.
It's undignified as an approach to taking the message. If your message is failing, obviously you've got to do something else. But folks, let's not stoop to that level.
Right. Well, and as you pointed out, and I think you tweeted about this too, if you can't run on your record, this is what you offer. I mean, if you can't attract people and have a big gathering simply because, you have a good track record or you've got a good platform, then this again just smacks of the kind of that desperation you're talking about.
That's right. And look, the world, we've been talking about it all morning. There are serious problems. There are solutions to these problems. And I will tell you, among the solutions to the problems that we have is not free beer.
Really?
That is not one of the answers. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you have enough of it, I guess you can forget about all your problems. So I guess
Yeah.
that,
They'll be there when you wake up. But
yeah, yeah.
yeah. But we've
Let's
got, we've
go ahead.
got a great campaign going. We've got a lot of momentum. We've talked about it this morning. We're excited about where we're headed, and we're just a few weeks away from the August 20th primary. And this is something I remind people continuously when I'm meeting folks out in the communities is we do have a primary. It does matter. I do want you to vote in the August 20th primary because while you mentioned earlier, Michael, it is sort of a poll, right? But that poll is going to serve some purposes. We're going to find out where people are at, what they would like to see, who they would like to see, and we need you to make your voice heard. So I hope if you're out there listening, when you get a second, mark your calendar today. Just mark it, right? If you've got a calendar on your phone or something that you write down, mark down August 20th because that's the primary date. Make sure to vote.
Yeah, get out there and get it done. As I've said, I'm a little concerned because there are so few House and Senate seats in the state legislature that are going to be affected by this, that people will just feel like, meh, it doesn't, but it does matter. I mean, it does matter. I mean, even for planning purposes for some of these candidates, as they look at it to see where they're at, it'll help them focus where their money needs to go or where they need to be, focusing in the campaign. It's definitely a big help. But in your race specifically, it's a make or break. I mean, it really is a make or break for that race.
That's right. And we look at the end of the day. We've talked about issues today, but there's a lot of opportunities on the ballot too for us. We have more resources than any other state in the country. That's undisputed. We have more estimated undiscovered oil and gas resources than any other state in the country. And one of the things that I've asked throughout the campaign is why would Joe Biden trade resources from the world's most responsible jurisdiction for resources coming from some of the world's worst jurisdictions for responsible resource development? And the answer is because he really doesn't actually care about the environment. What they're trying to do is they're trying to reduce our resource activity in the state down far enough that they can flip our state from red to blue and achieve again their goal of permanent power by getting a couple additional Senate seats, right, that they can hold on to. There's a goal to shut Alaska down, and it doesn't have anything to do with the environment. It has everything to do with power. And when you understand the Democrats through that lens, a lot more of what they're doing around the country and all their crazy policies start to make sense. We've got to push back against that in this election cycle, and it starts with the U.S. House seat.
Nick Begich, AlaskansForNickBegich.com. You can go out there and you can donate. You can request signs. You can do whatever you need to do. Nick, thanks for coming on board. As always, it's good to talk with you, and we look forward to seeing you again here in a couple of weeks. Thanks for coming on board.
Sounds great. Thanks, Michael.
All right. We got to go, folks. All right, that's up against the top of the hour. So final bite at the apple, Nick. Here, I'll give you anything we didn't hit on that you wanted to hit on, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I think we hit on some good things this morning. We talk a lot about the economy when we're on the show, and I think one of the things that's interesting, and I think you'll hear more about this as we get closer to November. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, as they've been reporting job numbers throughout the last couple of years, there's been a couple of different series, and to explain this in greater detail, I'll need to do a little bit more homework. But basically, you've seen a couple of series that track each other very closely with the household survey and the official number put out by the BLS. And what you've seen is a divergence in those surveys, and the officially reported numbers show that the jobs numbers are strong and good. But what you're seeing in the other survey is a divergence where the reported job numbers are not nearly as good as have been reported. And there may be as much as 1 million to 2 million jobs that have been overstated as having been created over the last couple of years. And when those numbers finally correct, we're going to see a major reconciliation in the markets potentially when people realize, the economy hasn't been nearly as good as we have been saying that it is. We talked in an earlier segment, and we didn't quite have enough time to get to this. One of the questions you asked was, how do we actually solve some of the economic problems that we've got? One of the answers, of course, is getting more fiscal discipline in Congress. But another answer that needs to be talked about is lowering the interest rates. You cannot be at 0% interest for years and years and years and then juice the rates to 5.5%. 5.5% is a great number historically. It's right around the median over the last 30 or 40 years. But to go from 0% to 5.5%, what happens is that a lot of businesses that generally operate, let's say at a 5% margin or a 2% margin even, they load up on debt during those years that you've seen rates at 0%. And then when rates jack up to 5-6%, their debt load is so high that when it gets refinanced, they can't carry the debt load and they start to fail. And what you've seen as a result is that U.S. bankruptcies have started to spike because these businesses have had to refinance their debt. Typically, those debt terms, if their credit lines, respond immediately. If they're short to medium term financing, it's within a 5-year period. And so those rollovers are occurring for that debt. They're being rolled over at a higher rate, and it's killing companies. And so you're starting to see the economy respond to it, and people are going to lose jobs, they're going to lose businesses that they've spent their lives working in because the Federal Reserve decided arbitrarily, in my view, that they needed to jack up the rates in order to slow down the economy. But they're not just going to slow it down, they're going to kill off businesses that have been producing value for many years simply because of bad fiscal policy in the Congress.
Right. Well, and that has a serious knock-on effect because, again, the whole thing is based on consumer confidence. And so when they find out that the numbers have not been as rosy as they said they were going to, that has a continual effect as well. And even when they say that things are going well, the Fed says, well, we're really not going to mess with the rate right now. We're going to wait and see instead of dropping it 0.5% or 1% or something to give them some kind of hope or incentivize them to continue to participate in the market. And it is a scary time. I mean, nobody really wants to be buying a house when the prime is 5%. Nobody wants to be investing in a bunch of stuff when the prime is at 5%. That's a tough nut to swallow.
That's right. And it's having societal effects where entire generation of young people is delaying their life progression. They're not having kids. They're not buying their first home. They're struggling to move forward. And it's a generational problem. And if it's not solved, we're going to continue to experience the dividends of that policy for decades. Right? I mean, we're barely at a replacement rate in our country. That means that the fertility rate has dropped to a level where we're barely able to maintain our own population without considering the effects of immigration. And when a population curve peaks and then starts to decline, it creates a great deal of tax burden on the younger people in order to support the older generations. And so you've got to have some growth in your population base. Otherwise, it creates these effects that we haven't seen in America's history, but we are seeing play out in places like Japan and Korea and parts of Europe, where they're having an aging population and declining native population. And that is a problem. And it creates a downward spiral effect because as people have greater tax burden, they're less able to have larger families, which further reduces the birth rate. And so this problem compounds on itself, and it can be very difficult for a nation to get out of. So interest rates, believe it or not, are one of those initial components that can create this problem. And we've got to get those rates lower so that people can move on with their lives.
Yeah, because I'm seeing videos all the time on YouTube or wherever, TikTok or whatever, talking about how, oh, we can't afford this because, and then breaking down the costs and everything else. And as things get more and more expensive, I mean, the whole idea of the American dream of having the house and everything else, we're actually kind of reversing some of that trend to where we're now going back to multi-generational homes because they can't afford to be out on their own. And not that, I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing to have a multi-generational home unless you're living in 1,500 square feet, in which case then that's a problem. That's why all those farmhouses were 2,000 or 3,000 square feet, because they had multiple generations living. So the trend is going to have to catch up, but it is a problem for sure.
It is. It's a problem. And it's, again, these are not private sector issues. These are issues created by government and government policy. Government shouldn't have that much control over our daily life. This is what frustrates so many people as I travel the state. People are just so frustrated because they've got to stop what they're doing. They've got to get involved in the political process. And for a lot of conservatives, they just want to be left alone. They just want to live their life. They don't want to have to think about politics 24 hours a day.
Right.
But what's happening is people are having to think about it more and more, get involved more and more. And I'm glad they're getting involved, but it's not because they're really enthusiastic about government. It's because government is encroaching so much on their life that they've got to get involved in order to push back. And that's not just true in Alaska. It's true outside Alaska. People are pissed, and they should be upset because it's the government that's taking away their standard of living.
Right. Well, and it's the same kind of thing we were talking earlier with Sarah Montalbano about, you just galvanized 20,000 plus homeschooling parents to get involved. They probably just wanted to be left alone. You know what I mean? But at every turn, people are getting more and more galvanized, and they have to participate because they just wanted to be left alone, but now they've got to. But again, it reminds us that politics is what happens to you when you stop paying attention. So we gotta pay attention. Although nobody wants I don't want to focus on this stuff 24 hours a day. Unfortunately, that seems to be the mantra. All right, Nick, folks get a hold of you. How do they do it? What do they do? Where are you going next?
Yeah. So AlaskansForNickBegich.com is our website. Come out, get involved. We've got a very active Facebook page and Twitter account as well. Be a part of the conversation. They tell people who are running for office, don't read the comments. Well, I read a lot of the comments. I mean, virtually all of the comments. So if you're commenting, if I don't get back to you, I'm sorry. There's a lot that goes on in the middle of the day for a campaign like this, and we get hundreds of comments a day. But it does get through. So be involved, be engaged, and remember that this seat doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to Mary Peltola. It doesn't belong to any candidate. It doesn't belong to any party. It belongs to you, the Alaskan people. Make sure that you're involved and make an informed decision. Vote.
All right, Nick. Well, thank you, my friend. As always, it's great to hear from you. Thank you for coming on board, and we look forward to talking to you again here in the near future.
Thanks, Michael.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much. All right, folks, we are out of time. We got more coming up tomorrow. Brad Keithley, Chris Story, the whole schlemiel, the whole shooting match is going to be here. We're going to be back then. Be kind, love one another, live well. Thanks for being part of the show. We will see you then. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.